It seems that Russia wants to pick a fight with Trump even before he gets to office. You guys remember how just few weeks back Russia used its new Oreshnik missiles to strike inside Ukraine? It was an intermediary range missile that Russia said it used or it was forced to use after US President Biden gave permission to Ukraine to strike inside Russia using Western weapons, Western missiles, namely ATACMS and Storm Shadows. Putin then went on Russian state TV and told the world that this was the most advanced missile in the world, and West has no air defenses that could stop that missile. Well, that's not really true, but that's not the topic of this video. But now, we have the Russian Deputy Foreign Minister saying that Russia would not even have Oreshnik missiles if it wasn't for Trump. If you don't believe me, hear the clip for yourself. But first, like always, be sure to hit the like button down below. It helps us out tremendously with the algorithm, and here's the clip.
Oreshnik is not a strategic ballistic missile. It's an intermediate range missile which was tested in combat and the results are known for people in Kiev, for people in Washington, in Brussels, and of course in Moscow. We used this as not just a messenger of a sense, but we use this to test what we really have in terms of our growing and additional capabilities in this very crucial area. Let me tell you that if not for the Trump 1 administration that simply destroyed INF Treaty, which served well interests of both US and Russia for several decades, then there would be no Oreshnik in our hands. We will still be restrained from our capability to develop such weapons, but okay, it's gone, and now we have what we have. We do not complain about missed opportunities. We look forward. We are very sure that we will reach all our goals and objectives through our action on the ground, and all the objectives of the special military operation will be achieved.
Now let me give you a little bit of background to explain exactly what he's saying here. He's initially talking about the 1987 Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty. This treaty was signed by the US and the Soviet Union, and the goal of the treaty was to eliminate and permanently forswear all of their nuclear and conventional ground-launched ballistic missile and cruise missiles with ranges of anywhere from 500 to 5,500 kilometers. This treaty was in fact the first time both superpowers had agreed to reduce their nuclear arsenal and eliminate an entire category of nuclear weapons. To make sure both sides were following and fulfilling their part of the treaty, both of them employed extensive on-site inspections for verifications. Initially, the treaty went great for everyone. Both sides destroyed thousands and thousands of missiles, making the world a better place. But then after a little while, Russia started to violate its side of the treaty. United States first alleged in July 2014 that Russia was in violation of the treaty to not possess, produce, or flight test a ground-launched cruise missile. And even after the first warning, the violations continued in 2015, 2016, 2017, and 2018. That's why, to not fall behind and risk national security, in December 2017, the Trump administration released an integrated strategy to counter the alleged Russian violation of the treaty, which included commencement of research and development of American intermediate-range missile systems. And that's exactly what he's referring to, saying Trump was the one who pulled out of the treaty, when in reality, Russia was just breaking the treaty all along. Here's Chuck Farr, former Navy SEAL, explaining more of this.
Right, so we've got an interesting case of victim blaming here. The intermediate range ballistic missile treaty was up for renewal. It's the Russians who pulled out. The United States wanted to keep the negotiations going. The Russians had violated the treaty with the exact missile that you saw them use on Ukraine. They had developed and fielded this weapon, showing that they were never in earnest about fulfilling treaty obligations. One of the treaty obligations was that you don't develop these kind of missiles, right? You don't work on them and you don't field them. So this gentleman is blaming Trump for the fact that that Russia felt compelled to use a prohibitive weapon against the nation of Ukraine. And it's only the mind of a Russian diplomat who could twist the facts in that manner. It's all your fault that I was beating my wife almost to death.
Now, it's not just this. Russia has been spooked by some of the actions President Trump has taken since he has won the election. Before we move forward, as Christmas season is approaching, I want to talk about the best gift I got this year. This minimalist Exter Card Holder Pro. It's half the size of your conventional wallet and it can carry up to 12 cards and cash. Best part is, it doesn't bulk up like an old school wallet. It's super slim. It's super easy to access all your cards with one button. It has a built-in RFID blocking that protects your cards and ID from data theft and skimming. Now, Extra also has a finder's card that you can put in your wallet. This way you can track your wallet directly from your phone and see its exact location and ring it if you need help finding it. Now for Christmas, they are already having a 50% off sale. But with our code, our community can get up to 55% off. So click on the link below or use the code BusinessBasics for 55% off anything you buy. First and foremost, we cannot discount some of the cabinet nominations President Trump has put forward, some of which include people who are very hawkish on Russia and Putin. Then we have Trump's nomination of General Kellogg as a special envoy to the Russia-Ukraine war that's going on. And on top of this, the most recent Trump tweet that came just a few days after he met President Zelensky in France is also something that Russia is not happy about. Here's the tweet. Opposition fighters in Syria, in an unprecedented move, have totally taken over numerous cities in a highly coordinated offensive and are now on the outskirts of Damascus, obviously preparing to make a very big move towards taking out Assad. Russia, because they are so tied up in Ukraine and with the losses thereof over 600,000 soldiers, seems incapable of stopping this literal march. Syria, a country they have protected for years. This is where former President Obama refused to honor his commitment of protecting the red line in the sand, and all hell broke out, with Russia stepping in. But now they are, and like possibly Assad himself, being forced out, and it may actually be the best thing that can happen to them. There was never much of a benefit in Syria for Russia other than to make Obama look really stupid. In any event, Syria is a mess and is not our friend. The United States should have nothing to do with it. This is not our fight, let it play out, do not get involved. The thing that's probably stressing a lot of people in Russia is the fact that President Trump shared the figure of 600,000 losses, casualties for Russia in Ukraine. This is not something that Russian government acknowledges. In fact, their figures, which are likely fake, very, very likely they're fake, are much, much lower. And Ukrainian figure, which are probably over-exaggerated, a little bit higher than the 600,000 figure. So President Trump is likely using a third-party statistic of 600,000 that Russia would not want its own citizens to know. But anyways, as you guys might have heard, Tucker Carlson recently interviewed Lavrov, the Russian foreign minister, on his podcast. And here's what Lavrov had to say about President Trump.
What do you think of Donald Trump?
I met him several times when he was having meetings with Putin and when he received me twice, I think, in the Oval Office when I was visiting for bilateral talks. Well, I think he's a very strong person, a person who wants results, who doesn't like procrastination on anything, and this is my impression. He's very friendly in discussions, but this does not mean that that he is pro-Russian, as some people try to present him. The amount of sanctions we received under the Trump administration was very, very, very big. And we respect any choice which is made by the people when they vote. And we respect the choice of American people. And we are open, as Putin said, we are open to contacts with, we have been open all along with the current administration. And we hope that when Donald Trump is inaugurated, we will understand what The ball, as Putin said, is on their side. We never severed our contacts, our ties in economy, trade, on security, on anything.
On top of this, we recently had fellow YouTuber and geopolitical analyst Pyotr Kurchin on our podcast, and here's what he had to say about Trump's position on Russia.
But what I think is another dynamic here, which you alluded to earlier, was the fact that nobody's quite sure what Donald Trump entering the equation means. Now, we know he's very supportive of Israel, and that's clear. We also know from what he's written publicly that he was not sad to see Assad go. But I think was really interesting was to see how he commented about Russia's weakness and Russia's inability to defend its ally, Assad. So when you see that, how do you think that Putin perceives the fact that Trump has said things that were borderline of insulting, that Putin had made a bad deal, that he got into Syria and didn't know what he was doing? Even more, Trump has said that he's got about 100% tariff on goods coming from the BRICS countries. I don't know how somebody in the Kremlin could interpret this to be a sign that Donald Trump is interested in cozying up or become better friends with the BRICS countries. What's your analysis?
Well, it's such a revelation, right? We've had this conversation, the two of us, on my show as well. And I think what's really interesting is I don't know if it would be a U-turn, but significant pivot in a lot of Trump's rhetoric. Now, it is just rhetoric, right? It's just words, but still, Trump does often like to speak his mind and what he intends to do. And I think Trump's also, his foreign policy is governed by transactionality, right? He wants something if he's going to give something. And his comments around Assad, I don't think come as too much of a surprise. But most of us, I think, would have assumed that Trump wanted to fully pull out of Syria and doesn't really care about the Kurds or, Russia's role or presence there. He's not interested. Had these developments in Syria not really happened, then you could argue that probably his comments might not have been as notable. But because of this seismic shifts in the past 12, 13 days, this is obviously something that plays into his calculus. Some of the people he's putting in around him, his advisors, are also illustrative of that, I think. But when it comes to BRICS as well, every country is interrelated in some way. Russia may be ostracized by the West, heavily sanctioned, but they're very dependent on China, and China's, heavily invested and integrated with the US economy. So if Trump's going to sanction, or at least put tariffs on the BRICS and including China, that by default is going to affect Russia. So it's a domino effect. So that is something that I think the Kremlin is going to still be concerned about, particularly during this period of overheating. It is the winter period. It's never easy in parts of Russia and the north, particularly during a full-scale war, which is not exactly going well for the Kremlin. So I think Putin's going to be extremely wary of these comments, and even more wary by the photo op, that Trump had with Macron and Zelensky in Paris. It's notable that Trump was wearing a yellow tie and a blue suit, and I have to admit that I did share an image on my own social media, which was where the photo was heavily enhanced to make it look like Trump was wearing a lighter blue suit to sort of indicate or symbolize the Ukrainian flag. It wasn't that bright. It was a dark navy blue suit. But the point is, some of the comments that Trump made around Zelensky indicates to me that he is maybe not softening, but certainly considering more the Ukrainian perspective, plight even, and what was once the potential of complete and utter withdrawal of support for Ukraine entirely, or even defunding of NATO, is very much not likely at the moment. And I think doubling the tariffs, right? It's going to be a double whammy effect. You've got doubling of the tariffs on China, on BRICS. That's going to affect Russia, which is going to be a negative feedback loop. And then you've got the positive feedback loop where Trump continues to support Ukraine. So we could see a significant reversal of fortunes in the next few months or even weeks, depending upon how fast the Trump cabinet moves. But, there's so much going on, as you said. So how do you see this playing out?
No, I agree with you. It seems that Trump is getting a heavy dose of anti-Putin at the moment. On one side, he already had his predisposition to not love Iran. He's always been against the government of Iran. And certainly, the Israeli government is trying to encourage that. But then you look at who he's spoken to recently. Not only did he meet with Zelensky in the United States a few months ago, but he met with him again at Notre Dame in Paris. He met with Macron, who's also not a friend of Putin's. But then he also met with the Prime Minister of Armenia.
Yes.
So it looks like he's getting a lot of information that's saying Vladimir Putin's not our friend. So I think that bodes well for us. And the more that the United States realizes that Russia's war in Ukraine is actually just an element of a global war against the West as a whole, not about Ukraine. It's never been about Ukraine. Ukraine is a battle, but a very important battle, but a battle in a global war that Russia is fighting. So, how do you think the collapse of Syria will affect Russia's war in Ukraine?
Well, it's almost sort of potentially well, there's a few factors. You could argue on the one hand, Jason, that actually it's almost like Putin doesn't have to worry about it, right? We've lost it. Okay, it's over. It's done. Let's move on. Just focus on Ukraine. It's one less front to have as a headache for Putin. And I think this is indicative because Assad obviously has been granted asylum, but he still hasn't been able to meet Putin. And I think that's quite interesting. Putin clearly doesn't see Assad as that important anymore. He's expendable. He's useless, frankly, let's be honest. But it is very problematic for Russia in a few ways, but the most notable that comes to mind at the moment, because it's still in a complete state of flux, are the two bases in Western Syria. We've touched upon the importance of the naval base and the air base for Russia's activities in Africa, but it's the Mediterranean as well. Currently, the Russian vessels are docked outside of Syria, right? They haven't gone down to Libya, as some people suggest. They may still do that, but basically they are in a limbo. They can't use the port or don't want to risk angering the rebels and want to obviously play a diplomatic soft power game, try and keep those ports or the bases. But right now that means they're in the middle of the ocean. Well, that's not exactly great for maintenance. It's not great for usage, operations. Not that the Navy plays necessarily the biggest role in Russia's campaign in Ukraine, but it's still a massive headache and requires attention, energy, resources to manage. And also, just generally, Russia, if it doesn't have the ability to exert its influence or presence, at least in Eastern Med, that is a huge problem for its sort of how it plays into the Black Sea. And then obviously Turkey and Russia have this competitively cooperative relationship, which basically means that they operate in similar theaters, have sort of interests at times, but also conflicts, right? Russia's jet was shot down by Turkey in the Syrian war about 6-7 years ago. So this is obviously a problem for Russia in the context of Turkey's control of the Bosphorus Strait, access to the Black Sea, even beyond how many vessels that Russia's lost at the hands of Ukraine's remarkable maritime strategies over the full-scale war. So this is a huge problem for Putin. Syria maybe wasn't necessarily a direct resource for Russia's campaign. But again, it was this counterbalancing, it was this optics, it was the ability for Russia to feel that it had friends. And this trickles also down into Iran for one particular reason, which is Iran is a huge supplier of drones and other equipment, military resources to Russia. And with the loss of Syria and its access to the Shia Crescent, which is an incredibly important part of the Middle East for the Islamic Republic, that trickles down and affects the Kremlin, because they don't have a Iran which is as confident, as stable to go about doing this. So it all connects. And I think Putin's going to be seriously on the back foot here, trying to see how he can manage the economy, manage his relations with the new government or leadership in Syria, the strategical situation in the Eastern Med and therefore Turkey, and so much more, let alone a Trump administration coming in and potentially bolstering NATO. Right. And we've got a German election coming up. What could that do to a reinvigorated NATO leadership and EU? Lots here to cover in the coming weeks.
No, there's definitely a lot going on. And the fact is, there's a lot of things we simply don't know yet. But from far as I can tell, things are getting worse and worse for Putin in the economic front and on the military front. And I always think it is funny that the press talks so much about Russia making gains in Ukraine. The fact is, in the course of a year, to take 0.1% of Ukraine's territory, Russia lost hundreds of thousands of soldiers and expended incredible sums of money, just billions upon billions, where the Russian population is becoming more and more impoverished. Though all the statistics that you would see publicly shown say that Russia's economy is growing, it lies the fact that inflation is actually much higher, and those numbers are false. And as you've said, how does Russia possibly keep spending so much money on a military? But let's just imagine if the war were to end tomorrow. What does Russia now do? What's the basis of their economy? Where's the engine if it doesn't have the massive military production that it currently has?
YouTube is still not a fan of a lot of topics we cover, and that means the videos get restricted and demonetized. That's why we recently launched memberships and Patreons. This way you guys can support the content we make directly if you're able to. Because we want to continue covering this type of topics even if advertisers don't like it. We like doing it and hopefully you guys like watching it. That's why Patreon and memberships give us a way to continue doing this without worrying about YouTube demonetizing our videos. So if you're interested and you're able to support us, you can do so by joining our Patreon or becoming a member on YouTube. The QR codes will be on the screen and the links in the description. Your support is greatly appreciated.